Welcome to the Kindred Journey Podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Leslie. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. Hey there, I hope everybody's having a great day today. This is your host, Leslie, with the Kindred Journey Podcast. And we're going to switch things up today a little bit. I actually am going to share an interview with you of me being interviewed on my friend's podcast. My friend Chelsea Barbine is the host of the Cultivate with Chelsea podcast, Navigating Life Postpartum, Mama to Mama. She has been such a huge support of mine in my corner for the past few months on this journey. Some of you know that I'm actually, as I'm recording this, I'm less than a week from my due date with my second baby. And Chelsea and I crossed paths a few months ago in a podcasting class that I've actually had her as a guest on my on this podcast as well. And her episode has already launched. It was a few weeks ago, and it was Cultivating Pillars of Courage with Chelsea Barbine. And yeah, she graciously let me use the content from our interview for her podcast. And I'm going to share that with you today. Basically, we went on a roller coaster of the last year of my son's birth and life and learning what it's like to be a new mom and all the feels in between. We kind of dive into talking about how change is the only constant through that first year and also inside the labor and delivery room. I feel like we checked a lot of boxes with my first child's labor and delivery that were not planned or anticipated. And it really taught me real fast to let go of expectations and how Jesus kind of took the wheel on that one. So I can't wait for you guys to listen to this. We talk a lot about how planning and preparation, especially being a first-time mom, birth is similar to the wedding day, and how planning for marriage and life after birth seems to be kind of a second thought and focus. I remember my wedding. I was so focused on the day of and all the planning and all the details and all the ins and outs of that one day. And while we did do premarital counseling and focus on the marriage as well, the emphasis was really on the wedding day. And I feel like with my son, my first child, it was also on the labor and delivery and the birth classes and prepping for labor and how truly you have no control. You are just the vessel and the container to carry this baby to when it decides to show up, how it's going to show up, when it's going to show up, all the things. I think it just really is a humbling experience, child labor, because you truly are not in control. And I actually think I'm going to do stuff a little bit differently, shake things up. This, I think, is going to be the 8th episode to launch of the Kindred Journey podcast. So the 9th episode next week will be me talking a little bit about finding courage through the waiting. This birth right now, the baby was breached a few weeks ago, and I was pulling out all the stops to help it flip. We're trying for a VBAC with this baby, so ended up in an emergency C-section with my son, as I dive into here shortly. So yeah, I just think motherhood and preparing for motherhood and even the second time around, how I'm really going to do things differently this time around with postpartum. I think what Chelsea's doing for moms and the motherhood community of bringing awareness to postpartum and her belief is that you truly are forever postpartum, which I can get on board with because I feel like motherhood has shaped me more as a person that I couldn't even imagine or realize before having my son. And I'm sure this next baby and this next birth is going to change me again. So I'm really excited to share this interview with you guys and to share. It kind of brought tears to my eyes, even though it was just a few short months ago, about 22 months ago almost, that this happened. It feels like quite a long time ago. It doesn't seem like yesterday in a sense. But a little bit about my friend. I'm super excited that she's willing to share this episode with us on this podcast because I feel like there is so much courage into going into labor. It's a lot of work. It's you don't know what you're going to get, what to expect. For us, we're actually not finding out what this baby is or what my son was. So it was fun to find out what the gender was at birth too. Some people think I'm crazy and can't imagine not planning for what the baby is, but in such an instant world that we live in, I feel like this is one of the one sacred things that instant gratification, it can take away, but it didn't for us. And hearing my husband announce what our son was in the labor and delivery was such a beautiful experience, especially how things unfolded and what we went through. It was just so beautiful to hear and envisioning what this next baby is going to be. I'm so excited to introduce our son to this baby and the anticipation around what the gender is of the baby with a lot of our friends. They're like, I can't wait to find out. So it's kind of like a Christmas present a little bit, sitting under the tree waiting. And we're also due really close to February 29th. It is a leap year this year. So that's kind of the other anticipation that people are not betting on, but guessing on, like, oh, is it going to be a leap year baby? Is it not? What is the gender? All the fun anticipation around it. So I'm very excited to share with the listeners once we get there. But first, we're just going to dive into this episode. And Chelsea, a little bit about my friend Chelsea. She's on a mission to help other postpartum women. She wants to help them embrace motherhood without sacrificing their sleep, sanity, or self-identity. And I think those are very huge things, especially in the newborn phases, the sleepless nights of breastfeeding and up with the middle of the night feeds and everything. Chelsea recently launched her Nested and Nourished postpartum guide, and it's a guide on the 4 negotiables that every mama should know, which I think is huge. Again, postpartum wasn't something that I prepared for in any way, shape, or form with my first, and I feel like I'm confidently prepared for this next postpartum and how to nourish myself and my body and heal through this huge experience, not just for bringing life into the world, but for mom as well and recovering from that. She also has recently launched a program called the Cultivate Crew, which I'm super excited about. I just signed up for it the other day. It's an online postpartum support group that comes without the judgment, packing the diaper bag, or unrealistic advice. So she has an online platform where women can meet and show up in whatever space capacity they're able to and receive support from other moms and coaching advice from Chelsea, who is a wealth full of knowledge. I don't know if you've listened to any of her episodes on her podcast, but the people that she has on are wonderful, and Chelsea's so insightful in how she carries a wonderful conversation and holds this space for moms, I think, especially in a time when it's winter here in Idaho, so I don't really want to go outside, and mommy support groups in person are awesome as well, but just to have that option to be online and to connect with people. I wouldn't have connected with Chelsea if I wouldn't have done a podcasting class that we met through, and she lives on the East Coast and I'm here in the Midwest, or not the Midwest, but the Pacific Northwest, Idaho. So yeah, I think it's just a great thing why technology is advancing at a rapid pace, in my opinion. It has its blessings and its place as well. Her Cultivate crew and her Nested and Nourished postpartum guide, she's actually being very generous and offering the Kindred Journey family a discount on these Core Care Cultivate products. And as a client of hers, I'm very excited to share with you 15% off discount, and that will also be in the show notes as well. It is Kind15, KIND15. And again, I can say I'm confidently walking into this next season of my postpartum journey with baby number 2 and with the tools and the support that I need. And like I said, I'm in Chelsea's corner 100%, super supportive. Again, not knowing what I knew with my first, but knowing what I know now and how I want to do things differently. I can say that I'm actually looking forward to this next postpartum journey. So if you could please sit back and relax and join me in this conversation with my dear friend Chelsea Barbine, and I hope you guys enjoy this birth story of my first.
I am so appreciative that you are here. Thank you so much. For everyone listening, we have Leslie Alberts. I pronounced your last name correct, right? Okay.
Yes.
Joining us today. Leslie is a mama and a expecting second time mama joining us. She and I met through a podcast course with Kathy Heller. And quite honestly, it was a conversation that stemmed from me being in the quote unquote hot seat. And Leslie found me on Instagram and reached out and was like, oh my goodness, I just have to share with you. I'm so thrilled about what you're doing. I'm following along. I really struggled with my first postpartum, and I'm like so curious to really learn more and preparing for baby number 2 on the way. And I was like, wait, first of all, thank you. I was so honored. I was like, people are paying attention. Again, you're just like so in it. And I asked if, she'd be willing to connect and really just honestly for me to get a little bit more of an insight on her experience, because just like as we were sharing our own pre-podcast recording pump up or like Zen focused practices are different. Our pregnancies, our, labor and deliveries and our postpartum experiences are just so unique to our, individual selves. So Leslie was amazing and so vulnerable in, sharing a lot about her journey. And I just cut right to the chase. And I was like, wait, will you just come on the podcast and tell everyone about this? Because although we are experiencing our uniquenesses, our own journeys, there's still a common thread to each one. And I think we can all really learn from hearing about, each other's experiences. So Leslie, thank you so much for one, connecting and reaching out in the first place, because again, I was so touched and so honored. And, two, for being you and feeling so comfortable to share. And then also for joining me today.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing. I think it's a beautiful thing for women. And I think one thing that women don't prepare for is the day after you get home from the hospital. So I think you being there to support and educate and help women along their journey, like you said, we all have our own journeys, but there is a common thread. And I'm excited to be here and share my story, and hopefully it can help somebody out along the way. If that's one thing that it can do, that's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Who is Leslie, and share with us, what's going on, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah. Well, that question is fluttering through my mind a lot these days. Who am I? After having my son about 17 months ago, and I'm a wife, and I work a full-time 9 to 5. I feel like I've lost a little bit of myself over the past few years with a lot of the, through COVID, and we got married in 2021, and then we got pregnant shortly thereafter. So there's just been a lot of change in our lives. And I feel like it's been good to grow, but also a little bit isolating at the same time. So I'm in Idaho and I love being outside. I love mountain biking and hiking and camping, and I used to rodeo and ride horses.
Wait,
So
you did?
I did back in the day. Wasn't the best at it, but had a damn good time doing it and met a lot of good friends. So yeah, no, just trying to find my groove again. That's why I signed up for the podcast course and find some
Mhm.
joy in my life in the current season that I'm in, which is in the thick of the early seasons of motherhood. So, and trying to embrace it
Mhm.
on the way.
Yeah. That is so first of all, I had clearly, guys, my reaction, I'm like, "Wait, what?" But also I could totally see that for you. As
It
much
was a
as I'm like,
blast.
"What?" I love that, and you're absolutely right. I think, first of all, change in life is so inevitable, and I think there's 2 I'm sure there's more than 2 paths, but 2 paths that I can personally see. It's like that sense of resistance or it's embracing it.
Mhm.
And neither is comfortable, whether we choose to resist or we choose to embrace. And I think really motherhood, I mean, for me personally, taught me that, like, again, you can either choose to resist all the changes coming and potentially experience negative feelings that come along with that, or you can embrace it and release this desire for a sense of control and just welcome each day as it comes, because let's be real, no day is the same, no matter what your routine looks like, because each day you're not only navigating a new sense of self, especially during those early days postpartum, but you're really learning and interacting with a human who every day is changing and learning their surroundings and the world around, just really embracing life as it is, which for them is huge because that was a huge change. So not only did the mom, we go through the change, but so did our baby.
Right. And they were in the womb and comfortable, and then they come into this whole new world, and they're also like, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? It's a beautiful experience. And I think one thing that I learned early on was the only thing constant is change. Like you said, not even the same days. If they're finally getting on a nap routine or a sleep routine, or it's going to be different in like a week or two with the growth and this and the. So that was one thing that I tried to embrace early on in my journey of motherhood, and also to release expectations. I
Ooh.
would find myself getting frustrated if my son didn't nap like he normally naps, or oh, this is how having this fixed expectation of how it's supposed to be, and not just with my son but just with this season that we've been going through has definitely been um, eye-opening, and to tap into the present moment, because that's really all that is the present. So those are my two big takeaways from this last year and a half almost.
No, that's so beautiful. I would love to hear more about, the piece of really embracing that change is the only constant. I mean, that can be hard, especially for, women like ourselves who we find a sense of routine, especially if you're used to working a corporate 9 to 5. There's like a natural flow of things. And then suddenly we are gifted this magical being that's like, haha, LOL. Just
Yeah,
you wait, mom. How did
absolutely.
you navigate? I feel like I'm still navigating it, and I'm sure you are in your own way too, but like, how did you do it?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I definitely would take days where I would have to go for walks, or say I'm in my 30s when I had my son. I had an
Mhm.
established career. My husband and I married, in our early 30s, our 30s, and so it's almost, I feel like, harder when you're kind of set in your ways and this is how it's supposed to be, or this is
Mhm.
how I like it. And then like you said, your world kind of gets turned upside down when this human that you don't have control over, but you love so much. So yeah, I think it was just a day by day process, and some days were better than others. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way around it. I've learned to carve out me time, whether that's 5 minutes in the morning or getting a workout in or a walk in, or trying to fill my cup in the same sense as also nurturing for this human. It's definitely been different as we enter toddler phase. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
Granger is ex- exploring and figuring out who he is, and that he's not cleaving to me like he once used to, and so dependent on me. He wants to explore the world and is curious, and also has an opinion, even though he's not quite audible yet, but he'll let me know what he likes and what he doesn't like. So just kind of navigating this new transition into the first year is about loving that baby and nurturing that baby and caring for that baby. And then once they get past that 12-month baby stage, and they don't look like babies anymore, they're starting to walk and talk and be more active. So yeah, I think it was just a day by day experience. And like I said, I was not perfect at it. I'm still not perfect at it. um the other day, Granger was getting he's in this not eating phase right now, and I was getting
Mm,
frustrated because he wants all the junk. And I
yeah.
want him to have a nurturing meal. That's, as a mother, that's my role, is to provide nurturing food for him. And I was getting frustrated. I stopped, took a few deep breaths, turned around, and reset, and that really worked. So just to kind of find the things that work best for you in that moment or in that season. It's always changing. It's what I did when I had a newborn is not what I do now. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think it's just tapping into who you are and what works for you and what fills your cup in that moment, and how you can navigate frustrating, when you're frustrated or they're frustrated too. And that's what I also try and remind myself.
Oh, I love that. I do. And I think, again, going back to that piece of, you know, just expecting the change to come, whether it's for ourselves and, kind of playing with different self care modalities and practices, what works not only for the age of our baby, but also too for where we're at in our postpartum recovery. I believe you had shared with me when we first chatted, you did have a C-section. And so perhaps like there was some things that you would have loved to have done that like weren't really conducive for where you were at in recovering from that. And I think, for everyone listening, it's just like kind of releasing this, what I used to do is going to be what will fulfill me in this current moment or even in the future. Like we don't know. Just as if when we're interacting with, our newborn or our 6-month old or our year old or year and a half old, and et cetera, et cetera. Like it's a constant exploration. And I think, just as you were saying, what works in one moment, we might not have the same resources to kind of tap into. I love a good sweat. I love, like yoga class. I love to breathe. I love that sense of like, I'm with me. Well, there are some days, specifically Mondays and Fridays, where mama does not have that option. And, it's just like where can I find my minute to pause, that reset, as you were saying. And I really appreciate you calling that out, because again, it's day to day, month to month. I'm sure year to year, I can't speak for beyond where I'm at right now, but it's always shifting. It is.
Absolutely. And I think something to reiterate what you said about anticipating change, when you are pregnant and you take the pregnancy classes, and I don't know how many dads were like deer in the headlights in the pregnancy classes that at the end of them, they're
Mm,
like, oh my gosh, like, and I feel like personally, we checked a lot of boxes and a lot of options off of our labor and delivery experience. Not by choice, but I think you can get in your own head about that change and what's to come and how to anticipate it versus just kind of being prepared, but also being flexible and navigate it as it comes. And I think sometimes you work yourself up so much more when you get in your own head about it versus just, again, releasing those expectations and just kind of being with the moment.
Mm-hmm. So not only expectations of ourselves, but then also too with the experience in itself.
And I in the beginning of my I did have a, they don't like to call them emergency C-sections, but my son was willing, or unable to progress, and I was unable to deliver. So we did end up, I think, at like 36 hours of labor, ended up with a C-section. So even then, I was having a pity party, saying I was robbed of this experience of having a baby the natural way. And that's what I envisioned, And so even as this labor, what a wild ride it was, progressed, I knew I had to let go of that because a healthy baby is the end goal. It's not having a vaginal delivery. So, I think, eating my own words or learning from my previous experience for this upcoming one to just kind of embrace what is versus trying to they say have a birth plan, and I called it a birth preference for that reason, not to have the expectation of a plan. But I think, you get, like I said, you get so wrapped up in the birth and the delivery, and you take all these classes to prep for that one thing, but then there's a lifetime of experiences after that one day or few days that they don't coach you on. I was not prepared for postpartum at all. It didn't even like phase me. It didn't even go over my head. And when we got home, it's like, now what? We have this new human, and we have a house and dinners, and we didn't talk about how all of this was going to be orchestrated.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so interesting. So yeah, I'm working on the 4th trimester guide right now. And one thing that I'm finding, right, is even with the preparation, right? Like Colin, my husband, and I, we're kind of known in our family as like, I don't want to say foodies, but like we like food. We like to eat very mindfully. He's great. He helps in the kitchen, especially anything that comes with a grill. Like he loves to grill. And I just kind of figured, like I'll meal prep. My mom was going to be in town for the first week. Like we'll figure it. We can order a little bit here and there, but like we'll be, again, he was off for the first 3 weeks. So there was that container of support. And I was just like, oh, it'll work itself out, Guys, when I tell you that like we weren't even thinking about food, you really lose track of time, and not necessarily in a bad way. It really was so exciting to be, I mean, goodness, you carry this baby for 10 months. You just like think about like, oh, I wonder what he or she's going to look like. And what are they, you just like, and then here they are and you're holding them and you just like don't want to stop looking at them, or like, or they're not sleeping well and you're sleep deprived, or, perhaps again, it's an unexpected method of delivery or type of delivery and you're recovering from that. Or there's so many, and I'm just like really using very stereotypical call outs here. So know that there's so much more outside of that. But all in all, to say that like going into postpartum, like I was like, oh, this is like how I think it's going to be. And like, no, like I myself wasn't the person that I thought I was going to be, because I myself was a different person, as was my husband. Like he didn't physically deliver our daughter. No. And he was there for the delivery. Like I think sometimes we forget a little bit about that when it comes to like our partners, is that like we, as the carriers of the child, like there's a sense of like processing that happens along the way. And I remember when pre-pregnancy, I was chatting with another girlfriend, and they had said, they were like, yeah, it's crazy to really think about it. Like, I feel like it wasn't until the baby got here that like the light bulb went off on my husband, and he was like, oh yeah, like, oh, I'm a dad. And then like they still need time to process, guys. Like this is a huge deal. So it was just, it was so interesting that like, again, even though I did prep, like I should have prepped more. I should have prepped more just for nutrition alone. Should have prepped more. Go ahead.
I made the prep that I did was like I said, I was hell-bent on having a natural delivery labor, and God proved me wrong real quick. But I made the little pads with the witch hazel and the lavender and the aloe vera gel, or what I would put them in the freezer, was prepared. That was pretty much the only prep that I did. And actually we went into the hospital at 38 and 5 or 38 and 4. We were doing some extra monitoring for my son, and they found out that I had no amniotic fluid, and I was about to go to breakfast and go for a walk with a friend, and had my day planned. I had my dogs in the truck. I was getting ready to go for a hike, and I come out of that appointment, and they said, well, you're going to have to go get admitted to labor and delivery right now. And I didn't even have my hospital bag. I was still, almost 2 weeks away from delivery. So I called my husband. I called our doula, told him what was happening, because with this extra monitoring, I felt like they kept me I erred on the side of caution. They really kept me on pins and needles. Like first child, I don't know, and getting me nervous and all these things. So I had to. One of our friends came and got our dog. I was like, what about my dogs? I can't even go home and shower and have breakfast and get my bag that's packed.
Yeah.
So ended up in the hospital, and you said something about our spouses not prepared, not being it's a different journey for all of them as well.
Right.
I think that that's also not talked about. I know men aren't as vulnerable as women, or as open as women tend to be. So that's a whole nother story. But I think my husband seeing me in the pain that I was in, and he could do nothing about it, was a very humbling but uncomfortable experience for him. Because he, especially after my C-section, and seeing me in labor and not being able to do anything for me, that was probably one of the most painful things for my husband through that experience.
And going back to the whole point, right, of like there's just like not a lot of talk about it. Birth in itself, and I think postpartum in its entirety it's not really talked about. And I don't know, like I'm like almost wondering, I'm like, where, like, was that always the case? And if not, then where was the shift?
I think that we were more in community and it takes a village kind of a mentality. Now we live further away from family member. We don't have family members nearby. And I think that you did it together as a community, as a large family. And now I think it's becoming more talked about, because I think before maybe it was just more experienced with each other. And I'm, like I said, I'm happy to advocate. And I actually just ordered an expecting mom for the first time. That's a friend of mine. The 4th trimester book. I included that with her shower gift. Yeah,
I love that. Such a great book. I actually have that over here on my bookshelf.
I listened to it while we were, or while I was, in postpartum. Did not, like I said, didn't really have a plan. I had a friend that experienced postpartum depression on one end of the spectrum. And looking back now, I feel like I experienced postpartum, but from a different perspective, because it was opposite how we were feeling, but it was still postpartum, depression. And I think that's also something that's not talked about enough or normalized. I think it's, motherhood's such a wonderful experience, but it's also an isolating experience. Sometimes it can be. Because you've sometimes, or some days, you feel truly alone. And I think coming together in community, and like what the community that you're forming, I think is such a beautiful thing, because you truly feel like you're not alone.
Mm, thank you for that. It's unfortunately like a truth for all of us. Goodness, there would be times where, I mean, again, like I was very supported, my husband being here physically. For the first 3 weeks, he worked remote. He still does work remote. That was one huge positive that came out of COVID for us. Um, we have in-laws who live just 10 minutes. I have in-laws, his parents live 10 minutes, down the road. And I had a couple of girlfriends who were expecting their first within, just a few months of us. And even with that, right, there were still times that I felt alone in it. And I think, for me personally, the breastfeeding and the pumping, that was the most challenging. And I think it's so funny because I'm like, duh, aha, like aha moment. It was this expectation that I had that it started off to be a very smooth experience. I thought everything was working. I thought my daughter had a great latch and, my supply was keeping it. Like, I just thought it was good. And it was quite honestly, quite the complete opposite, where she wasn't, removing or transferring, I think is what the terminology that the lactation consultant would use. She wasn't transferring, efficiently and enough, and my supply was down. And um, I just remember thinking, like, I would look to my girlfriends and, one was like, oh my goodness, no problem. Like, her daughter, if anything, wouldn't even take a bottle. Like, it was kind of challenging in that lens. And then, another girlfriend, she did have a good supply. Her son seemingly had a good latch. However, she was getting mastitis and, he developed thrush. And it was just like, oh my, I just feel like everyone has like an oversupply but me, right? Because again, we don't talk about it. And I think I wasn't really around anyone who breastfed. I had a cousin, who did, but again, she's a little bit older. Her kiddos are older than Frankie. So it was like I knew that she did, and she was always offering, like, if you need help, let me know. And I was so appreciative for that. And also knew that she was a good hour away. So to your point, it's like even with this like perhaps sense of community, even through social media, it's like thought and felt that like we are connected. It can be very challenging, um, without like that physical community, that physical tribe. Um, and again, it's like, mm, mm, different than I expected.
And again, holding those expectations or navigating, I think part of breastfeeding, I don't want to say it's societal pressure because I don't see it now that I'm not breastfeeding. Like, you have to feed your, because back in, my mom was sharing with me when my sisters were babies, it was all about formula feeding, and then it kind of reshifted back to
Hmm.
breastfeeding. So it's like, where does this shame come from? But I do think it's just a hardwired, maternal, I need to nurture and provide for this baby. And breastfeeding is how I do that for the first year, whatever. I have
Hmm.
several friends who had babies all within about 6 months of Granger, before and after. So it's been nice to have that support and community, where we live. But yeah, moms would say, "Oh, I'm going to breastfeed till my son's 12 months," or "I'm going to do this." And I even remember me, like, I started traveling for work, I think when Granger was about 10 months old, and I was holding on by a thread with it, and I'm like, what am I doing to myself? I'm just causing
Mm,
extra stress and pressure on myself. That's, he's healthy, he's starting to eat solids, he can be on formula, it's fine. Like, but I think as mothers, it's just, it's such a nature and nurture thing for us to provide for our babies. Just going back to what I said earlier about my son not really wanting to eat right now, I made this nice
yeah.
meal for you and you don't want it, like, that hurts my feelings. But it's, so yeah, I think breastfeeding is its whole thing. And like, I think if I had any advice for moms that are, first time moms or even second time moms, we're hiring our doula again from our first labor. We're also going to attempt a VBAC if it's successful. If not, I've come to terms with, a C-section. It's not scheduled right now. We're still pretty early on, but I think a craniosacral therapist or a lactation consultant, I know a lot of them do both. My son had the upper lip and the lower tongue tie. So just going to see one for a consultation won't hurt. And I was using the wrong size pump components for
the flange. Yeah,
the flange for like 7 months because the lady in the hospital the lactation lady in the hospital told me that's what I was. So there's just so much, like I said, they prepare you for the labor and delivery, but then it's like, good luck, you're on your own after this. Like Granger was in the NICU the whole time that I was recovering in the hospital from my C-section. And I wanted just one night with him up in my room. They kept moving the goalpost for him, kept checking boxes, kept pushing it down the line, kicking the can. So we ended up leaving the same day, but never had been together for a night. So we were in for 5 days. And they decided that we both could go home simultaneously I had to go home, but Granger was able to go home after that. So I'm like, you're going to send me home with this baby. And he's 5 days old, but I've never even spent the night, the same room with him. So yeah, I think it's kind of a good luck. You're on your own now. So experience for some people. Some people have a beautiful experience. Like I said, it's and now knowing what I know how to advocate for myself. And this next go around will, have pretty loose expectations and see where it goes.
What was that like for you to bring him home? And then as you were sharing, like it was your first overnight with him. Like what was that like?
Gosh, if I can remember. I honestly remember more ever since, or when I did have my C-section, my husband had to go to NICU with Granger immediately. So I didn't get to do skin on skin. I got to touch his cheek for a second. They had to stitch me up and do the things that they had to do. I went and saw him on my way up to my room, but that was it. I mean, I felt very disconnected from my own, they talk about skin on skin and the golden hour and all these things. And I didn't get to experience any of that. I know he was in good hands being taken care of, but trying to get him to latch and go down every 3 hours to the NICU, which was on a whole nother level. And I was in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk. So it was just a lot of isolation, I guess. I just distance from my own, my own offspring. Coming home was a wonderful feeling because we all could be together. My husband didn't get to stay at the hospital with me the night that Granger was born. He had to go home. And so it was just a very emotional, isolating few days after he was born. And coming home was wonderful. It's that euphoric feeling. I remember just, oh my gosh, pinch me, is this even real kind of a feeling. He's so beautiful and perfect. And yeah, it's amazing to be home, especially after what we experienced. If we would have maybe had a smoother experience, maybe it would have been oh shoot, what do we do? But we were just blessed to be home.
I mean, even we had a completely different experience, and I resonate with that feeling of like, we're home. You're in this environment that like is just so not yours. And even with, experiencing something completely different, we came home and I still felt that sigh of like, we did it. Like we got through this buildup of like, what is it going to be like? What is it going to feel like? Is it going to go how I'm hopeful for? And ours too. Like it wasn't exactly how I had, envisioned, yet it was it was still very beautiful for us. And I think coming home was almost like the closure of that, and then the start of a new chapter. Yeah, there was still a lot that I think we were like, the first time we went to sleep, we room shared, and I just remember being like, oh my God, like I was so nervous to close my eyes because I was like, what if for some reason we don't hear her or we don't, and she wasn't hooked up on any sort of monitor or anything like that, but the nurses still come in and out. They're checking on her. They took her to read, certain testing and things. And it was almost like kind of like, God forbid something were to happen, like we're in the best place for something to happen. And coming home, I was just like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to fall asleep. I'm so tired. I need to sleep, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to. So that in itself, I think, was my personal experience of being like, I'm so appreciative and I'm also so worried.
Yeah. Well, I think that's motherhood, right? We're always going to worry, even when they're teenagers and living on their own. And I think that's just also part of the motherhood and the parenting experiences that we will always, once a mother, always a mother, my mom says. And it's funny how much more I sound like her every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just sounded like my mom. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just like, oh, my mom would say something like that. So it is funny when you're a kid and you like roll your eyes like, gosh, mom, what are you, you don't know what you're talking about. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I am the version of you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can relate to that as well. Yeah. My mom was in town this past weekend, and there was a lot of things that I noticed when she was here. And I was just like, interesting. And again, not necessarily in a bad way, just in a very eye-opening way. But as you were saying, like, that is motherhood. Like, I feel like I'm learning so much each and every day. And
absolutely.
it is really the embracing of that that opportunity for change, if you look at it as an opportunity. One question I would love to ask you before we kind of like bring this beautiful conversation to a close is, I think isolation is huge for so many women. And with you preparing for a second, knowing what you know, how will you support yourself to lessen the likelihood of feeling isolated again?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I've thought about this summer, especially, even though it wasn't immediately postpartum. But I would say just community. You have to embrace your community that you have. I was lucky enough to have my mom and my dad visiting while we came home from the hospital. My mom was very helpful around the house, and we had a meal train. And if you don't want people to, if you want them to put it in the ice chest on the front porch, set your boundaries, make them clear. But also, if you want that company to come in and have a human conversation and have a little bit of normalcy in your life again, then have it. Do what feels right for you. I think my husband is in wildland fire, so he's gone in the summer. So I had a single mom summer. Used to be fun before we were married because I go do things with girlfriends all the time. But now that I'm a mom and working full time and trying to, take care of everything around our house, it was a lot. It was unintentionally isolating because I was just in the mode of the do it mode of for everything. So I think, and in my head, I would say, oh, well, I don't have family here to call, or I don't have a nanny, or, or it just building up narratives in my head about why it is what it is. But it is what it is. Like I said earlier, like releasing some expectations. And if I would just send a copy and paste text message out to 10 of my friends here, because we have such a wonderful community here, that people would be more than willing to help out. Or if I need something, or if I just need a friend to come over and have some coffee with. I think just stating my needs and making sure that they are met, because that's the only person I'm the only person that can hold myself accountable for that. So whether it's, help with my son or help and get a babysitter so I can go have a movie night by myself if that's something I need, fill my cup comes back to that. I think that's something that you want a solid foundation as a mother, for yourself, because I feel like once you go down, everybody else, everybody relies on you. So I think you just have to you have to advocate for yourself and have to take care of yourself. So to do things differently, we are, our doula that we are rehiring is also, we signed up for postpartum doula services because I don't know what it's going to be like with two. I just know what it's like with
Yeah.
one. And while Granger will be in daycare, it's also, you just don't know. So I think just to have like a loose plan of, I might need this extra support. I don't know how much or how little. And also, I think a meal train is a wonderful thing, or preparing your own food. Having that kind of a community around you really makes you feel loved and supported. And mommy and me groups. I'm actually also leaning into maybe starting a side business where I do.
What?
Yes, that's also evolved in the last Kathy call last Thursday. So yeah, just maybe even starting small with like mommy and me days or walks, or promoting that in my next trimester season. So, or my postpartum fourth trimester season. So looking forward to that and seeing where that can lead, and not just postpartum, but events. I love connecting with women. I love hearing their stories. I love hearing the journey that they're on. So, but starting small in the next season that I will be coming into in the near future, I thought that would be a good place to start. Also, taking the podcast class, I wanted to start a podcast for fun and not do it as, I have a job. I don't have a side hustle or a side business, but just kind of navigating through this season of motherhood and this new season of my life. I want something to fill me up and light me up. So just kind of, and getting messy. I think I'm learning from my son the best. It's okay to get messy and do things messy. And just see where it goes. And if I just enjoy it as a way to meet other moms and other women, then that's not a bad place to be.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Like, talk about releasing the expectations with all of that.
Yeah, 100%. Because I never in a million years thought I'd be thinking of what I'm thinking about today.
I just have to like bring this really full circle here. Yes, in this conversation, but also I feel like throughout where I'm at in life right now, I feel like the many conversations that I've been having, so much is truly gained through the experience of motherhood. Like
100%.
embracing really just again the like almost like the slap in the face of like, you think you know what's happening, but like you don't. Like you think you have control, but you don't. You think that this is how it's supposed to be. Maybe it is, but more than likely it's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like leaning into it and just like embracing the change, the unexpected, releasing the expectations on ourselves, on our situations, on just like, I love that. I
It's
really
a wild
do.
ride. That's for sure. And I feel like, we're doing it again. We're starting over with number 2 here in a few months. And motherhood is the first new thing I've done in a really long time. So I feel like if it was, like you said, motherhood shapes you in so many ways. And I feel like if it wasn't for motherhood, I probably wouldn't have the courage to take a leap of faith and step out and do what I'm doing, kind of, walking blind here. So, but it's exciting and it gives me the confidence to do so. And I'm excited to see what it's like with 2. And taking what I learned from my first experience and applying it to my second. And, it might not be the same. It might be different, might have a different, I've heard you can't parent two kids the same way because they're different. So it's like, that's
Yeah.
another thing to navigate. But it just gets different. That's the other thing. It doesn't get easier. It doesn't get harder. It just gets different is the advice that I've been told after I had my son, not before. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this before so I could prepare a little bit better?
I've heard that recently too. I actually had some women that I met through a Facebook mommies group, and two of them have two, and then me and then another woman. We just have the one. And one of the women who has two was sharing that same sentiment of parenting is very different from her son to her daughter. And she had said, it's quite fascinating because you hear a lot of like, it's a different child. True. And she's like, I'm a different mom. Just as you're saying, like, I'm going to take so much more into baby number two from like a knowledge, a confidence, etc. perspective into this, after my first into a second. And it's just like, yeah, of course, because again, each birth is a rebirth for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really the importance of like preparing for it as like the reminder of those pillars of like what does support us, right? What are those core needs that we have? If you know that like support is like all the way at the top, then that's what you're going to be preparing for. That just as you're sharing that like you are making that a priority for at least we have it if/when we need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be there. And I think too, just like realizing what are those practices, those modalities, those pieces that will help nourish and fill up your own bucket. So for you, you're finding perhaps not to say that walking and being in nature and, things like that don't do that for you, but maybe it's in a different capacity, or maybe, going into this new phase of life, leaning into this new version of you, it's like, if connecting with other moms who are going through it, that's going to be fulfilling for you, then like lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's really embracing the fluidity of it all. I am so excited for you.
Thank you. And it might not be the same needs with this pregnancy or this postpartum period as it was with the first. And another thing I guess I can reiterate is that I was craving normalcy, especially after I don't want to say unconventional, but just a lot of, like I said, a lot of boxes checked with the labor and delivery and a long 5+ days. And I went to the grocery store by myself. I drove a car after not driving for almost over a week. And it felt good to just be able to have that sense of normalcy, to go to the grocery store, to drive a vehicle, and the things that you take for granted almost every day, So it's okay to crave that too, and honor yourself and give yourself the space that you need and whatever that is.
I love that. I'm so appreciative for you joining. Thank you. I know that I have learned myself truly, like I have taken tidbits of this, even things that I remember you sharing in our first conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, that was really good. So I have no doubt that other moms listening are going to pick up on this. And I want to just close with, I do want to give an opportunity for you to share with others what your podcast is about, how they can connect with you beyond this. So, they can learn more from you, support you, etc. But I would love to ask, knowing what you know, if you had to give one tip to a first-time expecting mom, what is that tip? What is that main takeaway for them?
Give yourself some grace. Leave the dishes in the sink, take a nap, and give yourself some grace, because I did not do that. And it's a hard job. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy. So yeah, I think just every day, give yourself a little bit of grace. You're learning as you go.
Thank you. I will. Thank you for that reminder.
Yes.
Well, apologies again for my cough fit. And also my lozenge are just floating around in my mouth, so I'm not coughing constantly this entire conversation.
Thank you for
Tell
having
everyone.
me.
Oh my goodness. Anytime. We'll have you back once your podcast launches.
Perfect.
Tell me. How can people connect with you? What is your podcast name? When is it going to be available? What is it about? Tell everyone, because I know that they're going to want to listen.
Yes. So the podcast is going to be launched January 4th of 2024, and it is called The Kindred Journey, and it is about real conversations with women who step into courage when comfort's no longer an option. And I'm so excited to get started and share these wonderful stories. And if I can just help encourage one person, then that's what the purpose of the podcast is. So I'm very excited to get that out into the world. And you can find me at Kindred Journey on Instagram or Leslie Alberts and on Facebook as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. I will put that information in the show notes. Leslie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chelsea. I appreciate you so much and what you're doing for this community that needs it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.